Resource Watch is brought to you in association with Tebe Investment Corporation.
Hello and welcome. We're talking nuclear power and its deployment or lack thereof in Africa. I'm Nozi Pombanjwa and this is Resource Watch. Let's kick off with the market wrap for this week.
The iron ore price has fallen below the key $50 a ton mark for the first time in almost a decade. The plunge is due to a combination of the world's largest miners such as Rio Tinto and BHP Billiton flooding the market with supply as demand from China's steel producers has fallen. South Africa's Mines Minister Nwako Ramatlhodi is cooperating with the mining industry to test the interpretation of the mining charter. The main sticking point is whether past deals count towards the 26% black ownership stipulation. Government has been reviewing compliance with the decade-old charter. And South Africa has launched Africa's first ever 100 kilowatt fuel cell that runs on platinum. The platinum power fuel cell was installed at the Chamber of Mines offices in Johannesburg. South Africa wants to gain entry into the manufacturing and distribution of fuel cell components.
Now we know that African countries need reliable, accessible electricity supplies which are affordable. This will drive economic growth and benefit all who live within the continent. But the question is, can nuclear power achieve this? And is Africa ready for nuclear technology? Joining me now is Dr. Kelvin Kemm. He is the CEO of Nuclear Africa and he takes on some of these questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Kemm, for making the time to join us again. It's always a pleasure hosting you on CNBC. Let's maybe start off with a very important meeting that's taken place in South Africa, the Nuclear Africa Conference. What's the significance of this gathering and what are the main things that have come out of this gathering?
Well, Nuclear Africa has now become the premier nuclear conference of the year in South Africa, and we hope to get many more people from other African countries as the years go by. This year we had President Zuma come to the dinner in the middle of the conference, but we also had Mr. Mano, who's the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency. We had the Chairman of the World Nuclear Association and a number of other prominent people there. Plus, of course, the very important people, the local industrialists and the local engineers, scientists and others that are all involved in nuclear power. They, of course, are very important. So it was a very significant gathering of people who can make things happen. That's what's important.
The bigwigs are in the room, the important names are all in the room. What came out of the conference?
Quite so. Now, what has happened is South Africa has said some years ago already that we intend to produce another 9,600 megawatts of nuclear power. That's to add to the 2,000 we already have at Coburg down in the Cape. Now, what's important to note is that, as you said in the introduction, we need reliable baseline power. South Africa is big. People don't tend to realize we mustn't make the mistake of just looking at what Europe is doing and think that Europe translates over to South Africa, let alone Africa as a whole. We are big. Our coal fields are all in the far northeast of the country. Now, the distance between Pretoria, which is where the coal fields are beyond Pretoria, and Cape Town, where the nuclear power is the same distance as Rome to London. Now, when I gave a talk in London, I said, how would you feel if half your electricity is coming from Rome? They'd say, utterly unacceptable, right. Far too risky. Currently, half of Cape Town's electricity comes from the coal fields. The other half comes from the nuclear power plant.
So if we know that there is potential when it comes to nuclear in South Africa anyway, and we know that this can improve reliability and security of supply, surely it also means that the strength of the anti-nuclear narrative is gaining momentum, because it doesn't seem as if there's a broad embracing of nuclear as a real option, at least amongst the normal population.
Yeah, there's a lot of sad truth in what you say. Unfortunately, the anti-nuclear lobby around the world is not particularly honest. They just plain and simply anti-nuclear, and they just do not want to hear anything contrary. In fact, nuclear is the safest, cleanest and most reliable of all the energy sources. A while ago I had an article published in Washington, D.C. about Fukushima, and it created quite a reaction. And people always say, look at the lessons learned from Fukushima. Do you know what the lessons of Fukushima was? How many people died? None. Zero. How many people were injured by radiation? None. Zero. How much private property was damaged by nuclear radiation? None. Zero. At its worst, with the whole Fukushima thing, the radiation levels around the nuclear plant were less than is in Johannesburg every day, because Johannesburg's high.
Is it a public relations problem that we have, that we cannot seem to articulate and communicate the benefits of nuclear to the broader population then?
Absolutely, and certainly the nuclear scientists and engineers around the world have been largely to blame over the years. Let's face it, the worst way you could have introduced any new product to the world is to bomb the 2 Japanese cities at the end of the war. So there's always been that association. You know, today there's the unfolding of the Iranian nuclear saga in Iran about nuclear weapons that are going on. South Africa, by the way, has a particularly good image. Mr. Mano, when he was here from Vienna, said not only is South Africa utterly competent, technologically speaking, in nuclear, but he said we've got one of the best records in the world for nuclear cooperation on a regulatory front. We allow anybody from the International Atomic Energy Agency to come out anytime unannounced and look at anything they want to look unhindered. And that is very important, that we show this honesty and openness in all nuclear dealings.
So there's a great degree of transparency, but let's talk about the energy mix. And we're seeing that the government has taken a stance that seems to be pro-nuclear when it comes to the energy mix. Bring us up to speed in terms of where we are. We've heard speculations of deals being signed with the Russians. Clarify a lot of those murky waters and just give us a sense of where exactly is South Africa with the nuclear path.
Okay, well, a while ago, some years ago, the government said it's aiming to double South Africa's electricity production and consumption by 2035. So our longer-term objective is not to save electricity, but to use much, much, much more. I emphasize more efficiently than ever before, not wastefully, but we're going to use much more. There's no such objectives across Europe to massively increase the amount of electricity, let alone if you look at our African neighbors who have to increase electricity consumption even more than us. So it's a dramatic thing we face. So the government has said we will do this 9,600 megawatts. We've now got to decide exactly which type of reactor. That has not been done yet. All the countries have been given an opportunity to come and do their pitch. Now bear in mind as well that we have uranium. We've got lots of uranium. We've got lots of thorium. We have the richest thorium mine in the world. Thorium is the other nuclear fuel that can be used and which is looking very promising right now. And the only things you can do with uranium and thorium is use them in nuclear reactors as fuel or use them as doorstops. There's nothing else you can actually do with the stuff.
I think we probably need more energy as against doorstops in South Africa.
Absolutely.
But let's talk about the consumer. What does this mean for the consumer? If we see that energy coming onto the grid, does it reduce the cost of electricity? At the end of the day, why should I, as a normal, ordinary consumer, care about South Africa's nuclear path?
Okay, very good question. Firstly, it's safe. So worries that your babies are going to die and get fried and all this sort of thing is just not true. Now, work done at University of Northwest has shown that nuclear power is cheaper than coal power over a life cycle. So scare stories too that it's going to be horrendously expensive are just not true. At the moment, solar and wind is very expensive. The wind is about 3 times the price of what the coal is. So the stories that solar and wind are somehow free are just not true, right? They're highly intermittent. It is not reliable baseline power. You're not running an electric train from Cape Town to anywhere else in South Africa on a windmill, but you can run it on a nuclear power station. We have to shift nuclear power down south. We've got to bring more baseline power from the bottom up. We cannot rely on doubling South Africa's consumption on the basis of hauling it out of the coal fields in the northeast. Now we come to other African countries. People say, all right, these nuclear power stations are big, expensive. Yes. The 3 power stations that we plan to build now will be 3 of the biggest nuclear power stations in the world. They're about 3,000 megawatts each, that sort of order of magnitude. But there are now small nuclear plants. The Russians showed us a nuclear plant of a floating plant that they're busy building that you can put on a dam of 70 megawatts. South Africa was building the Pebble Bed nuclear reactor, which was a fantastic design. It's sad that we stopped. That's 100 to 200 megawatts. That's 5 to 10% the sort of size of a big nuclear power station. Those types of nuclear power stations don't need to be on the coast. They don't need big water. You can put them anywhere you like. Now, Africa is so large. Africa, as a continent, is larger than China, Europe, India added together. You know, it's huge. So we've got to put power all over Africa. Nuclear is the answer. So
if nuclear is the answer, very quickly in the South African context, timeframes, when might we begin to first see the fruits of the additional power through nuclear that the state is wanting to bring on board?
Okay, well, in his State of the Nation address, President Zuma said he wants to see electricity flowing in 2023 from a nuclear power station. I would like to see that as well. That means we've effectively got to start this year. The sites are ready. We know where to build, we know how to do it, we just need a couple of go-aheads. I want to emphasize that there's a large amount of localization aimed for, like 50% as a target, which means that there's all sorts of work opportunities, not only pouring the concrete, but welding of pipes and power lines and electronics and valves and pumps and all sorts of things. So there's huge work opportunities for South Africans and for other people on the continent as well. We need to make Africa a nuclear power continent.
Well, that's it from Dr. Kelvin Kemm. He says we need to make Africa a nuclear power continent. He is, of course, the CEO of Nuclear Africa. And that's where we leave that conversation. Let's take a look now at our gem of the week.
Nuclear energy is generated when a chain reaction of splitting atoms releases heat. This happens in reactors designed and built to accommodate the process. Metal rods inside the reactor are fitted with uranium pellets and bundled collectively. The bundles are in a pressurized vessel filled with water. There are two types of reactors, boiling water and pressurized water reactors. In boiling water reactors, heat generated when atoms split causes the water to boil. This produces the steam that drives turbines. In pressurized water reactors, water passes through thousands of pipes. The heat in the pipes converts the water into steam, which drives the turbines. In both reactors, the turbines power generators, which produce electricity. While nuclear facilities are generally considered safe, there have been terrible disasters, most recently in 2011 at Japan's Fukushima plant. Nuclear energy is used by more than 30 countries, generating around 11% of the world's electricity.
And that's it for this week's show. Do stay in touch. That's by following me at The Real Nosy or at CNBC Africa. And don't forget that our hashtag is ResourceWatch.